The transition from the open rec room to the private lounge was a quiet one. No ceremony, no awkward goodbyes. Just a soft word from Dr. Alvarez and a nod from Daniel, and the Taylors followed him down a short hallway into a small, windowed space designed to look comfortable but still felt controlled. A couch, a coffee table, 2 chairs, and a bowl of mints no one touched. Daniel stood near the window, arms folded. The sunlight caught his profile. Older, sharper, but still Daniel, still theirs. Or so they wanted to believe. The family sat. No one knew how to start. So Daniel decided that maybe it was time to rip off the Band-Aid. I'm not sure I should move back home. The words weren't angry. They weren't cold. Just steady. Like a decision already made. Lisa's breath hitched, but she didn't speak. Caroline blinked hard. Thomas didn't move. Luke leaned forward, elbows on his knees, waiting. Daniel continued, his voice calm but tired. I've been following you guys on social media, pictures, posts. I've been watching for a while. You're all doing great. Luke's back on the farm. Lisa's working again. Libby's thriving. Mom and Dad, you guys seem lighter. He looked at them, but only briefly. You found each other again after I left. I don't want to be the thing that pulls it all out of alignment. Sweetheart, Caroline whispered, but Daniel held up a hand. Please don't think this means that I don't love you or that I don't miss you. But I know that taking care of me was a burden none of you asked for. It was a strain on all of you, and now that we've seen what you can be without that burden, I'm not going to condemn you to going back to that old life. Plus, I think I've found my place here. They offered me a staff position, helping with integration. It fits. These people get me. I'm useful here. He looked away again. It's the first place I've ever felt like I wasn't someone's responsibility. And that was it. Lisa had tried. She had really, really tried. But her hands began to shake and her breath hitched in her throat. The tears came suddenly, raw, fast, unstoppable. You think we moved on? Daniel turned, startled. Lisa shook her head, her voice trembling like a fragile leaf in an autumn wind. The only reason I held it together was because I knew it was what you would want for us. Because I thought, wherever you were, you'd be hoping we weren't falling apart. Her dark eyes glistened with unshed tears, a mixture of pain and desperate hope. Daniel stepped forward, his movements hesitant and awkward, like a shadow uncertain of its boundaries. The controlled military precision he'd cultivated seemed to melt away in this raw, intimate moment. She looked up at him, her voice breaking like shattered glass, each word a jagged edge of emotion. Do you remember the promise you made to me? That night when I told you I was pregnant? His mouth opened slightly, lips parting in a trembling silent gasp, like a butterfly's wing caught between breath and stillness. No words emerged, just a profound, aching silence that stretched between them like gossamer threads of forgotten promises, fragile and haunting. You promised to be there, for me, for her. You said, I will love her just like I love you. Lisa reached into her worn leather purse, her fingers trembling as she pulled out a small stack of photographs. Edges softened and curled, their corners creased and faded from countless touches, each crinkle a testament to cherished memories. She held up the first, a sun-drenched snapshot of Daniel sitting in emerald grass, his lanky frame creating a protective cradle around a tiny, curly-haired girl. Their faces illuminated by matching popsicle-stained grins, their laughter echoing with the unbridled joy of a summer day that seemed to exist only for them. She still asks about you, Daniel, Lisa whispered. She's 7 now. She still talks about you. She thinks the stars are where you went, but she remembers. She handed him the second photo, Libby today, taller, brighter. Her mother's eyes and Daniel's crooked grin. I took this picture so you could see how big she is now. Daniel stared at it. And for the first time since they'd entered the room, he looked small. A man who had learned to lead soldiers now looked like a boy again. lost between two worlds, unsure which one he belonged to. Lisa wiped her face. She doesn't need a soldier, Daniel. She needs her uncle. She stepped closer and touched his chest with the photo. We need you. Daniel didn't respond, not yet. But his fingers curled around the photo, and he didn't let go. Daniel didn't speak for a long time. He just stood there, the picture of Libby in his hand, his thumb brushing over the edge like it was something sacred. The silence stretched, uncomfortable, pregnant with too many memories and not enough certainty. Then quietly he looked up. Dad, is the old feed trailer still out back? Thomas answered, unsure of why Daniel would ask about that. Yeah, it's still there, just as busted up as when you left. Been meaning to get it hauled off, just haven't had the time. Daniel nodded slowly, his gaze distant, as if already picturing the worn metal and splintered wood. I think, he began, his voice still low but carrying a new, determined edge. I'll need it. Luke watched Daniel, a flicker of understanding dawning in his eyes as he registered the unspoken request. That statement landed like a punch to the rest of the room. Caroline's mouth opened. No, she said quickly, shaking her head. Daniel, you don't want that. That place is still there, Luke interrupted, sitting up straighter. Roof's rusted, but it's solid. Caroline turned to him, eyes wide. Luke, you can't be serious. But Daniel raised a hand gently. I can't just move back into your lives like nothing happened. I need space. For me. For all of us. I don't know how to be who I was. And I'm still figuring out who I am now. Lisa looked like she might protest again, but Thomas spoke up, his voice calm. It's not the worst idea. Caroline turned to him now. Thomas, he's not asking to start over without us, Thomas said quietly. He's asking for room, to breathe, to come back slow. That's more than fair. Luke nodded. We can fix it up, insulate it, run power, maybe a little HVAC unit. I've got tools. We could make it nice. Thanks, that would be great, Daniel said, his voice almost too soft to hear. It's not about being apart from you guys. It's about having the space to figure out what it means to be me, without feeling the pressure to be the person you remember. Caroline's face was unreadable. Shocked, maybe a little hurt, but slowly, she began to nod. Her fingers tightened on the strap of her purse like she was holding something fragile and heavy all at once. Lisa looked between them, still trembling, but she breathed out and stepped toward him. As long as you come back, she whispered. You don't have to live in the house, just come home. Daniel gave a small, tired smile. As the room quieted and the last words of gratitude faded into soft murmurs, Daniel stood and crossed the space to where Lisa sat. He didn't say anything at first, just reached into a small canvas bag resting by his chair and pulled out a rough, palm-sized sculpture. It was simple, unglazed except for a faint yellow streak along the wings, the shape a little lopsided, but unmistakably a duck. Daniel held it out, eyes steady but soft. Made it in pottery, he said quietly. They told us to pick something that reminded us of home. Lisa stared at it, her breath catching, the air folding around her like a wave. Her hands trembled as she took it, the clay still warm from his touch. Her eyes shimmered, lips parting in a shaky breath. You remember, she whispered. Daniel tilted his head, a half-smile ghosting across his face. Some things don't get erased. And in that moment, for all the ways he had changed, she saw him. The boy at the duck pond, watching the ripples, quiet and bright and whole. Her arms wrapped around him before she could stop herself, the duck still clutched tight between them. It's perfect, she choked out, the words thick with emotion. Thank you, Danny. He squeezed her shoulder gently, a flicker of his old self in his eyes.
Back in 2040.
President Hart stood near the edge of the command suite, arms folded, eyes occasionally drifting toward the corner where Libby and Lisa sat, beneath the soft glow of a recessed hollow panel. Libby's recorder hovered between them, steady and red-lit, capturing every word. Lisa spoke with the slow precision of someone trying to untangle the past from its trauma. Libby, for all her youth, held herself with a poise that made the president pause. If this little girl survives the night, Hart thought, she might have quite a future in journalism. President Hart wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. But the moment of quiet reflection shattered as the door hissed open and one of the Joint Chiefs, General Greer, stepped in, his expression grim, tablet in hand. "Madam President," he said, voice low, "we've just received new information. Based on satellite telemetry and long-range scans, we've confirmed we are looking at Korath reinforcements. At least 12 capital ships and dozens of support vessels. Around 50 targets total." President Hart inhaled slowly. "Understood. Can Thunderwell handle that many?" "We believe so, ma'am. The data confirms some intelligence reports about the Korath fleet. Their main weapons targeting systems are vulnerable to our shielding and kinetic dispersion systems. It's going to come down to tactics. If they want to take us out, they are going to have to get pretty damn close to do it." Daniel Taylor's engagement protocols were designed for this exact kind of scenario. If General Taylor can bait them into the envelope, if he can draw them in line, we'll have our shot. They'll never see it coming. Hart sits in silence for a moment. Then, after a beat, her voice softened just enough to betray something almost human. "He always did have a knack for the impossible." She turned to the window where the sky was darkening with the shadow of something vast and terrible just beyond the atmosphere. A flicker of a smile ghosted her lips. "I just wish he'd lived long enough to see us use it." She turned back to the general, all steel again. "If we survive this, General, we're building him a monument. Right here in D.C., something the world won't forget." The general nodded solemnly. "But for now," she said, straightening, "send the message. Tell General Taylor we're counting on him to execute the plan, his brother's plan." "Yes, Madam President." He turned sharply, boots echoing against the reinforced floor. President Hart stood alone for a moment longer, watching as Lisa pulled Libby into a quiet hug, the recorder still blinking. The future was coming fast, and everything now rested in the hands of the Taylor family.
Back in 2035.
3 months after Daniel came home, the old feed trailer still sat rusting behind the cotton fields, its paint blistered from sun and time, a crooked gutter clinging to one side like a bad memory. But Daniel never moved into it. 2 days before he was scheduled to return, Agent Tucker arrived unannounced in a black SUV that kicked up red dust all the way down the long drive. He wasn't alone. Behind him came 2 box trucks, a trailer flatbed stacked with lumber and solar panels, and 2 full crews, some contractors in matching polos, but most were volunteers, men and women with tired eyes and quiet hands, people who didn't need an explanation. Tucker stepped out, nodded once to Thomas and Luke, and gestured toward the caravan. "We heard about the trailer plan," he said. This felt more appropriate. Thomas crossed his arms, uncertain. "And who exactly are they?" Tucker didn't flinch. "Some of them are mine, the rest. People who know what your boy went through. The details are classified. But his survival, it got around. 4 weeks in a POW hellscape. 14 years old when they took him. That kind of story, it earns a quiet kind of respect in certain circles." He paused, then added, "The world may never know what he did, but we do, and that matters." By sunset, the crew had cleared the old trailer's footprint and poured a fresh foundation. Within 24 hours, a sleek, modular living unit stood in its place, solar-powered, climate-stable, reinforced to agency standards. Inside were soundproofed walls, a private workstation, adaptive tech, and a quiet corner nook with a padded bench and wide window that overlooked the orchard. No one asked if Daniel wanted it. They just built it. When Daniel finally came home, he didn't say much. He stepped out of the SUV, backpack slung over one shoulder, and looked at the new structure with a tired squint. "Yours," Tucker said simply, then left without ceremony. Daniel stood still for a long time, just watching the evening sun spill gold over the fields. The house was the same. The porch swing creaked in the same breeze. Caroline was baking something that smelled like cinnamon and grief. But he was different. He walked slowly up the gravel path and paused at the foot of the stairs. Libby was sitting on the porch rail, hugging her knees. "Uncle Danny?" She asked the question. He looked a little different, but was still the same in all the ways that really mattered. "You are home for good?" the girl asked with a hopeful smile. Daniel looked at her, a strange mix of weariness and affection in his eyes. "For good, Libby," he said, his voice still a bit rough but carrying a new steadiness. "For good." The little girl raced to embrace him. It was a move that caught Daniel by surprise, and he was rarely surprised by anything. She grabbed him by the hand and led him towards the house, showing him all of her new toys and the pictures she had drawn. "I missed you so much, Uncle Danny, but my daddy stayed home the entire time you were gone, so I always had someone to tuck me in at night, but I still missed you." Daniel gave Libby another hug, a rare warmth spreading through him. "I missed you too, Libby. More than you know." He held her for a moment longer, the familiar weight of her in his arms a comforting anchor. "I'm home now, and I'm not going anywhere." Daniel broke the embrace, and for the first time since he decided to come back to this place, to come back home, he was sure he had made the right choice. For the first few weeks, Daniel embraced a metamorphosis. Mornings spent in deep contemplation within his trailer, afternoons engaging with the land through a lens of technological empathy. He rarely joined family meals, yet his presence was felt through meticulous cleanup and an emerging sense of purpose. His sleeplessness wasn't born of trauma, but of a mind constantly recalibrating, reimagining. Mornings on the Taylor farm had always been a ritual of survival, but now they became a canvas of innovation. By 5:30, when shadows still draped the landscape, Daniel joined his father and brother in a dance of observation that was part tradition, part revolution. Thomas moved with the weighted rhythm of generational memory, each step a conversation with the land. Luke carried conversation and caffeine, noting breaches and storm damages. Daniel, however, moved differently, not as an observer, but as a translator between two worlds. His silence was not absence, but a profound listening. He wasn't studying the fence line, he was decoding its language. Every uneven post, every sagging wire, every patch of overgrown grass spoke a dialect he was learning to understand and transform. This wasn't passive observation. This was reconnaissance. This was reimagining what it meant to steward land, not through muscle and manual labor, but through intelligence, adaptation, and respect for both human intuition and technological precision. When Thomas bent to inspect a gate hinge, Daniel didn't just watch, he absorbed. His crouch wasn't a mimicry, but a communion, understanding that maintenance was more than repair. It was conversation with history and potential. The pebble he picked up wasn't a souvenir. It was a data point, a tactile memory of a system far more complex than mere physical boundaries. Daniel wasn't just returning home. He was translating the farm's ancient language into a future dialect, where drones and human insight could coexist, where technology didn't replace tradition, but expanded its understanding. His silence was a promise. Change was coming, but not as replacement, as evolution. In the weeks that followed, Thomas got to see the changes in his son firsthand. It started with a 5 a.m. visit to the main house. Thomas was surprised to find Daniel ready to work, but of course in his own way. Not in work boots and fence-mending tools, but with tablets and know-how. Thomas did a double-take when Daniel laid it all out for him. Overlapping flight patterns, AI detection system, automated predator alerts. Of course, Thomas wasn't easy to convince. It took Daniel 2 weeks and several human versus machine contests. But eventually, Thomas had to admit that the drones could do it better than he could, or at least nearly as well, as he put it. Plus, they could all agree that at his age, his time could be better spent doing less physically demanding tasks. Tasks that required his experience and his expertise. "It's not about replacing you, Dad," Daniel explained, his voice soft. "It's about making sure the farm thrives for another 100 years. I'm just giving it a new set of tools." Thomas thought about the boy who went missing over a year ago, a boy they grieved, a boy they thought dead as they all moved on with life, not to abandon him but to honor him. This wasn't that same boy. In a lot of ways, he wasn't a boy at all. But he was. Thomas was sure of one thing. He was damn proud to have this version of Daniel as a son, and it wouldn't be long before the outside world saw what Thomas saw. In fact, someone already had.
2 days later.
The sleek black SUV that had delivered Agent Tucker to the farm reappeared at the end of the drive, a silent harbinger of disruption. This time, it wasn't contractors or volunteers filing out, but two figures in tailored suits, their faces impassive, their movements precise. They escorted a newcomer to the Taylor farm, a man filled with confidence, not just in himself, but in the young man he had never met in person. It was nearly dusk when someone knocked on the front door. Luke answered, still in jeans and a t-shirt, wiping sawdust from his hands. He expected a neighbor. Maybe a farmhand. What he got was a uniform. The man on the porch stood tall, composed, and unmistakably Navy. His white dress cap tucked neatly under one arm, silver hair perfectly trimmed, and an air about him that made even the cicadas go quiet. "Lieutenant Colonel Luke Taylor?" Luke straightened instinctively. "That's me." The man extended his hand. "Admiral Richard Jackson." Luke blinked. "Admiral?" "Yes," Jackson said, stepping inside as Luke moved aside. "We haven't met before, but I believe you've met my daughter." Luke hesitated for a moment before the Admiral continued. "Lieutenant Commander Jackson, formerly assigned to Naval R&D." Luke finally placed the name. "Tracy? Tracy Jackson?" The Admiral gave a polite smile. She didn't want anyone in rehab to know she was an officer. Caroline appeared in the kitchen doorway, eyes wide. Lisa stood behind her, drying her hands on a dish towel. Thomas looked up from the dining table. "We in trouble?" Jackson smiled, thin but genuine. "Not unless someone here's been impersonating a national asset." That got everyone's attention. Jackson set his cap on the entryway table and turned to Daniel, who had stepped out of his trailer when the SUV pulled in and now stood quietly in the back of the room. The Admiral gave him a nod of respect. "Commander Taylor, as I believe you are known in certain circles." Daniel raised an eyebrow and smiled. "Just a nickname, sir. No disrespect to your uniform intended." Jackson gave a knowing smile. "You convinced Tracy to get back in the fight. I don't care what your paperwork says. You earned that title. I'm also told there are a dozen soldiers spread across every branch who would salute you if they were here right now." Daniel looked down, modest as always. Jackson turned attention to the entire family. "I'm here for 2 reasons. First, to personally thank Daniel. We worked with a dozen therapists, psychologists, and combat recovery teams. None of them could get through to my daughter. Daniel did." Luke glanced sideways at Daniel, who gave a barely perceptible shrug. Jackson continued. "Second, Tracy and I are both transferring to Space Force, effective immediately. I'm taking over the agency's leadership." Luke gasped softly. Lisa stepped forward, confused. "You're taking over Space Force?" "Yes," Jackson said plainly. "The President has lost faith in its current structure. Too many generals trying to play Cold War games in a battlefield that no longer exists. We're redesigning the program from the ground up. New thinking, new faces." He turned back to Luke. "That's why I'm here." Luke crossed his arms. "This is a recruiting trip?" "There may be an opening for you on my team," Jackson said. "If things work out the way I hope, you would transfer from Air Force to Space Force. No deployments, no more hopping base to base. You'll be home for dinner with your family every night." Caroline beamed. Lisa reached for Luke's arm. But Luke narrowed his eyes. "That is amazing. I am still waiting on the but." "The but," Jackson said, "is that we need exceptional minds. We need strategic thinkers who can operate outside the box. Those are the kind of analytical prowess we need for Space Command. I think have found one, but I'll need your help. Jackson nodded approvingly, as if expecting the question. Your primary job would be to act as liaison to a civilian consultant, one who recently tested so high, we are having to refine our testing methods to get a more accurate gauge of his abilities. If I am right about him, we would need you to serve as the bridge between his mind and my command staff. Your first job would be to talk to him, to convince him and his family to let you escort him to Washington, D.C. for a couple of days. Luke's brow furrowed. Why me? I mean, there are certainly people more qualified for this kind of job. Jackson pulled a folder from under his arm and opened it on the table so everyone could see. These are baseline scores. We give this test to everyone who enlists or applies to a military academy. Then he pointed to the next column. These are the average scores for our top military leadership. Then he points to a third column. These are your scores, Colonel Taylor. As you can see, you are in line to be General Taylor sooner or later. Caroline and Thomas both beam with pride. But then Luke noticed the last column. Wow, whose numbers are those? That isn't possible, is it? Can anyone score that high? Those scores belong to the person I want you to bring to Washington, Jackson said. Luke's eyes widened in disbelief as he scanned the final column, a series of numbers that defied comprehension. They dwarfed even the highest scores he had ever seen. Who is this person, Admiral? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Admiral Jackson smiled, a glint in his eye. That, Colonel, is your brother. Luke stared, dumbfounded at the paper. Daniel? Daniel tested higher than anyone? Off the charts, Jackson confirmed, his voice grave. We had to recalibrate the entire system to even get a reading. His aptitude for strategic thinking, pattern recognition, predictive analysis. It's unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's why I need you to bring him to Washington. We need to see if that mind can be harnessed for something bigger than this farm. The room fell still. Thomas sat up straighter. Daniel? Luke's jaw dropped. Daniel, who struggled to form a sentence as a child, had shattered every known metric? It defied logic, yet the paper in Admiral Jackson's hand was undeniable. He looked at his brother, who stood quietly by the window, a man forged in a crucible Luke could barely comprehend, and felt a tremor of awe mixed with a surge of pride. Lisa looked at Daniel, her throat tight. Why didn't you say anything? Daniel shrugged faintly. They gave me tons of tests while I was there. Psych exams, GED, vocational assessments. It was just another test. I never saw these results before today. Not really sure that it matters, though. Jackson stepped forward again. It matters. If this wasn't a fluke, if this is what I think it is, then I have a project that needs him. Something I can't discuss yet. But I'll say this. He looked each of them in the eye, ending with Thomas. It could change the world, but for your family, it will change Luke's career. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Thomas, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. What is it that you really want from my sons? Luke's been wearing a uniform for going on a decade now. I understand the things he can do, but Daniel is different. Not less, but different. Jackson nodded. Yes, sir. To be clear, I won't ever ask Daniel to pick up a gun and go to war. I won't ever ask him to order someone else to go to war. But I may ask him to redefine how we fight, how we defend ourselves from some of the great threats you could ever imagine and some that you can't. Thomas looked over at his son, silhouetted in the barn light, quieter than ever, somehow older than his years. Well, he said softly, almost to himself, I'll be damned. Across from him, Admiral Jackson stood with the posture of a man used to being listened to, but wise enough to recognize when that time had passed. He wasn't sure what was going on in Daniel's head. Based on what he knew about Daniel's test results, he doubted anyone on this planet could truly understand him. But one thing was certain, Daniel was less than excited about his offer. The Admiral knew he still had work to do. All I'm asking for, Jackson said gently, is a couple of days. A flight to D.C., some time with my team. A few additional assessments. Nothing more. Tracy said you might not want to come. She told me to give you this as a last resort. I'm not sure what's in it, and part of me doesn't want to know, he said with a sigh. She asked that you open it in private, but that it shouldn't take long to convince you, the Admiral said as he handed Daniel the envelope.
White House, 2040.
Libby was still engrossed by Lisa's story, as was President Hart when she wasn't attending to urgent briefings. Lisa paused, her gaze distant, lost in the echo of past conversations. But Libby wasn't done asking the tough questions. Did Uncle Danny want to go to Washington? Lisa sighed. Not exactly, as a single tear fell down her face, guilt evident in her expression. Libby's face softened. In that moment, Libby was more of a daughter and less of a journalist. Still, both sides of her wanted truth. What happened, Mom? She asked. What happened was I realized I was a 26-year-old woman with a 7-year-old child. I had a husband who spent more time trying to get himself killed in some foreign country than he did home with us. Daniel had the power to change all of that. He could have kept Luke home, kept him safe. But I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't going to do it. That was it for me. I made my decision. I was going to do whatever I had to do to make this happen, no matter what it took. Because I knew in my heart that even Danny would be better off for it. At least that is what I told myself. So I used the one weapon against him I swore I never would. Lisa's voice dropped. Your Uncle Danny was only 7 when I met him. But as he got older, he started to notice me. It was all perfectly normal. He was becoming a teenage boy, and I was the only unrelated woman in his life. Caroline saw it first. Even before Daniel disappeared, she warned me about being too close to him, that he might get the wrong idea one day. But I dismissed her concerns. And I was right. Daniel never said or did anything inappropriate, but I knew at 15 he definitely still noticed me. So I went to him late that night after everyone else was asleep. I told him I wanted to talk to him about the night he disappeared. I asked him if he remembered walking in on me. I knew he had. I knew he had lied about remembering it in an attempt to protect me. I was right, he had. I told him that I was weak back then, and that I was still weak, that if Luke didn't stop getting deployed, that those kind of things would happen again, and that Luke and I would break up and that he would never see me again. Then I fell into his arms and cried on his shoulder, telling him he was the only man strong enough to protect me from myself. We had always been close. I used that closeness to push him onto that plane, pushed him all the way to Washington, D.C. And the worst part of it is, none of it was a lie. And you think that was the right thing to do? Libby asked, her voice quiet but laced with an accusation that made Lisa flinch. Lisa hesitated, then met Libby's gaze, her own eyes welling up. I don't know, baby. But I knew I had to do something to keep us safe, to keep our family together. And I thought he would understand.